Imagine this for a second. An appointed official, not elected by the people of a state, suddenly dissolves their entire elected legislature.
Right. Or they can just put a state law on hold, indefinitely.
Exactly. An official whose power is this critical link, or sometimes, let's be honest, a massive point of tension between the state and the central government.
Well, today, that's what we're doing, a deep dive into that very office, the governor.
This position really is the pivot point of India's quasi-federal structure.
Yeah.
To get the governor is to get how Indian governance actually works, and where it sometimes doesn't.
Welcome to the deep dive.
We take the densest material, and today we're focusing on the absolute high-yield insights from M. Laxmikanth's Indian Polity, specifically Chapter 30, and we turn it into sharp, actionable knowledge for your UPSC preparation.
We promise you'll walk away with a comprehensive, expert-vetted understanding, but, without your head spinning.
And before we jump in, a really massive and heartfelt shout-out to all our dedicated members and supporters.
Oh, absolutely.
Your subscriptions, your engagement, and especially your membership contributions. I mean, that's the engine. It's what lets us produce this kind of super useful, in-depth content and keep it accessible for all aspirants.
We are genuinely so grateful for your contribution. It helps more than you know.
And if you're finding this analysis valuable, we'd humbly ask you to support us.
Please subscribe to the channel, and if you're able, think about joining one of our paid membership tiers.
Your support just ensures we can keep delivering this kind of content. And don't forget to like this video and share your valuable comments.
Yeah, let us know which part of the governor's power you think is most relevant today, or maybe one you've seen in a PYQ.
Oh, and crucially, all the free notes for this deep dive, packed with practice previous year questions, everything you need to really nail this topic, it's all available right now on our Telegram channel.
The link's right below.
And for our Legend YouTube members, we've gone a step further. We've prepared premium notes with extra PYQs and, importantly, detailed model mains answers.
Especially for those complex questions on federal conflicts and the governor's role. That resource is waiting for you on our dedicated Discord channel, so make sure you join us there.
Okay, let's set the stage.
Sure.
The governor's core constitutional status. When you first look at it, the governor seems like a perfect mirror of the president, just, at the state level.
That's the starting point, yeah. Their fundamental identity is the nominal executive authority.
The de jure executive.
Exactly. And that's foundational to our whole parliamentary system. It's not like the U.S., where the governor is this powerful, directly elected executive.
Right.
In India, the governor holds the formal constitutional powers, but the real day-to-day authority, the de facto executive, that sits with the chief minister and their council of ministers.
Because they're the ones responsible to the legislative assembly.
Precisely.
So the governor is the head of the state, this sort of ceremonial figurehead, while the chief minister is the head of the government, the one actually running the show based on their majority.
And that parallel structure is key. It's identical at the union and state levels. The governor's position is completely analogous to the president's at the center. It's this system of a dual executive.
Okay, now let's get to the appointment process.
Yeah.
Because this is where that neat symmetry with the president kind of breaks down and where all the center state tension really starts.
Article 155, it's very clear. The governor is appointed directly by the president.
Which really means on the advice of the union cabinet.
In practice, yes. And that method of appointment, combined with their tenure Article 156, says they hold office during the pleasure of the president. That's the feature that really reinforces India's unitary tilt.
So they aren't elected by the state. They aren't chosen by the state government. They're an appointee of the center.
Right. And that makes the office this pivotal link, or as we've seen so many times, a major flashpoint. It's where the federal idea smacks right into central control. If you serve at the pleasure of the president, you are by definition responsive to the union executive.
Regardless of which party is in power in the state you're governing.
Exactly.
And this whole mechanism, especially when you see a new government come in at the center and, wholesale changes of governors happen, it's led to this perception that the governor is just a partisan agent.
It has. And that's not a new debate. It's been going on for decades, which is why various commissions were set up to look into it. The most important one being the Sarkaria Commission in 1983.
Their whole job was to review union-state relations.
And they came up with these really strict guidelines for selecting governors, trying to insulate the office from this kind of political manipulation. For anyone studying this, these recommendations are critical.
Okay, so let's go a minute on these Sarkaria mandates. They sort of represent the gold standard of impartiality that the framers probably envisioned. What were the key guidelines?
There were four main ones. First, the person should be eminent in some walk of life.
So not just a political lightweight or a retiring bureaucrat, someone with some real public stature.
Right, someone with nonpartisan credibility. The second point directly addresses that issue of local bias.
That they have to be from outside the state.
Yes. The person must be appointed from outside the state they are to govern. The whole idea is to prevent them from getting tangled up in local political factions, especially during a crisis like a hung assembly. An outsider is supposed to be objective.
And the third point builds on that.
It does. It says they should be a detached figure, intentionally not too intimately connected with the local politics of the state. It's not enough to just be from another state. They shouldn't have deep pre-existing business ties or political relationships there either.
So no conflicts of interest.
Exactly. And the fourth point hits the nail on the head about partisan politics.
This is the one about not making it a post-retirement job for loyalists.
Precisely. They recommended the governor should be a person who has not taken too great a part in politics generally, and particularly not in the recent past.
So no recently defeated politicians.
The intention was crystal clear. If you appoint a former chief minister from Party A as the governor in a state run by Party B, you're building in conflict from day one. It just undermines the governor's credibility as an impartial guide.
These recommendations seem like common sense if you want a professional, impartial office. What about tenure? Stability seems just as important.
The commission stressed that too. They said the governor's 5-year term should ideally not be disturbed except for extremely compelling reasons.
So no more firing all the governors when a new party comes to power at the center.
That was the idea. They called that trend corrosive to the office's integrity. A governor who's worried about being fired by Delhi at any moment can't be expected to act independently to protect the Constitution in their state.
Okay, so to sum up the setup, the governor is the nominal head, appointed by the center, serving at the center's pleasure. The ideal is this eminent, detached outsider.
But the political reality, as we know, often falls short of that ideal.
All right, let's move to the governor's executive powers. If they are the constitutional vessel, how does that actually work day to day? Article 166 seems key here.
It is. Article 166 mandates that all executive action of the state government must be formally expressed as taken in the name of the governor.
So every government order, every policy decision, legally, comes from the governor's office.
Yes, and that's not just a rubber stamp. It's the source of procedural legitimacy. It reinforces the idea that the ultimate constitutional power is vested in the head of state, even if they're almost always acting on ministerial advice.
And beyond that formality, they also function as an information hub. Article 167 puts a duty on the chief minister.
A very specific tripartite duty. First, the CM must communicate all decisions of the Council of Ministers about the state's administration. Second, all proposals for legislation.
And third,
the CM must furnish any information the governor asks for. So it's not just a passive receiving of information. The governor can proactively seek it out.
and that information flow gives them the ability to act as a kind of internal check, right?
Yeah.
To stop a single minister from going rogue.
Exactly. That's a powerful, though not often used, tool. The governor can require the chief minister to submit a decision made by just one minister, one that hasn't been discussed by the whole cabinet, for the consideration of the entire council of ministers.
So it forces collective deliberation.
It reinforces the principle of collective responsibility, which is the absolute bedrock of a parliamentary system.
Now, this is where the office really diverges from the president. The governor has unique discretionary powers. This is what you call the unquestionable realm.
Absolutely. This is probably the most debated part of the whole office. The Constitution explicitly gives the governor discretion in certain areas. And here's the critical part. If a question arises about whether something falls under the governor's discretion, their decision is final.
Final and can't be challenged in court.
Cannot be called into question. The validity of their action can't be challenged on the grounds that they should or shouldn't have used their discretion. It's a massive constitutional shield.
And that's combined with the fact that courts are also barred from even asking what advice the ministers gave the governor. So you have this dual protection.
You do. Secrecy of ministerial advice on one hand and finality of the governor's own discretion on the other. It makes them a very high-stakes player during any kind of political uncertainty.
Okay, let's get specific on that situational discretion. When does it actually kick in?
The source material lays out three main areas, all related to political crisis. First, the appointment of the chief minister.
This is for a hung assembly.
A hung assembly, exactly, where no party has a clear majority. Or if an incumbent CM dies suddenly and there's no obvious successor. In those moments, the rulebook is silent and the governor has to use their personal judgment.
They decide who is most likely to be able to form a government.
Right. And who they call first, the leader of the biggest party, the head of a pre-poll alliance. That choice is entirely up to them. It's a huge moment.
Okay, that's one. What's the second?
The potential dismissal of the Council of Ministers. A governor can dismiss the ministry if it loses the confidence of the Legislative Assembly.
But they can't just do that on a whim.
No. And this is where the judiciary stepped in. The S.R. Bommai case in 1994 was a landmark. It established that the only constitutional way to test a government's majority is on the floor of the House.
A floor test.
A floor test. The CM must be given a chance to prove their numbers. If they fail, dismissal is fine. If the governor dismisses them without a floor test, that action can be struck down by the courts.
A crucial judicial check. And the third area.
The dissolution of the state legislative assembly itself. If the government has clearly lost its majority and the governor thinks a fresh election is the only path forward, they can dissolve the House.
But they should try to see if an alternative government can be formed first.
They should, yes. Dissolution is the last resort. But these three situations, appointment, dismissal, dissolution, they transform the governor from a ceremonial head into an active political referee.
And that referee role gets supercharged when we talk about President's Rule, Article 356.
Oh, absolutely. When President's Rule is imposed, often based on the governor's own report that the constitutional machinery in the state has failed, the governor's role transforms completely.
They become the agent of the president.
The agent of the president and the de facto administrator of the state. They take over extensive executive powers, and the state essentially comes under central rule. It's the most potent example of that unitary feature in our Constitution.
For UPSC mains, the misuse of Article 356 is a classic topic. What did the Sarkaria Commission say about this?
They were very firm. They said Article 356 should be used very sparingly, only as a last resort. They were deeply worried about it being misused based on a politically motivated report from a partisan governor.
And the source material lists some of those classic grounds for misuse, right?
It does. A big one was a governor just deciding on their own that a ministry had lost its majority, without calling for a floor test. Bommai made that illegal.
What else?
Using Article 356 for things like, say, maladministration or corruption allegations, those are political issues to be dealt with through other means, not by dismissing an elected government.
So it has to be a genuine breakdown of the constitutional machinery.
Precisely. Not just poor governance, and certainly not, as happened in the 70s and 80s, just because the ruling party in the state got wiped out in the national Lok Sabha elections. That was a clear misuse of power.
Okay, let's pivot to the legislative powers. The governor as the gatekeeper of state laws. When a bill is passed, they have 4 options.
Right. And this is their role as an integral part of the state legislature. So an ordinary bill comes to their desk. Option 1 is simple. Give assent.
And the bill becomes an act.
Done. Option 2 is to withhold assent. This is basically an absolute veto. The bill just dies. It's rare, but the power is there.
Option 3 is the suspensive veto.
The suspensive veto? They can send the bill back to the legislature for reconsideration, maybe with some suggestions. But, and this is a big but, if the legislature passes it again, with or without changes, the governor must give assent.
They can't send it back a second time.
Nope. Their veto is overridden. And then there's option 4, which is the most powerful tool in their federal toolkit.
Reserving the bill for the consideration of the president.
Exactly. This takes the fate of a state law completely out of the state's hands and puts it on a desk in New Delhi.
When would they typically do that?
If the bill seems to undermine the power of the high court, or if it's wildly against the directive principles, or maybe if it threatens the national economic policy, it's a federal check.
And we should just clarify, money bills are treated differently.
Very differently. A money bill can only be introduced with the governor's prior recommendation. So when it comes back to them after being passed, they only have 2 choices, assent or withhold assent.
They can't send it back for reconsideration.
Right. The financial business of the state can't be held up like that.
Okay, let's drill down on that reservation for the president. This is where you said the unitary bias really shows itself.
It's fascinating, really. So the governor reserves the bill. Now it's with the president. The president can assent, withhold assent, or return it to the state legislature for reconsideration.
Okay, and let's say the president returns it. The state legislature, being firm, repasses it, and sends it back to the president.
Now, here is the constitutional ambiguity. This is the killer point.
Unlike the governor, who must sign a repassed bill.
The Constitution does not say that the president is obligated to give assent to a repassed state bill.
So they can just sit on it.
Forever. It's effectively a pocket veto over state legislation. It grants the center this significant, you could argue indefinite, check on state lawmaking. They can kill a state's legislative effort without ever formally saying no.
That is a massive unitary feature. It allows the center to just annul a state law that's passed twice.
It does. The justification is to ensure state laws fit within the national framework, but the debate, of course, is whether it's used for genuine constitutional reasons or just as a political tool to block rival state governments.
Okay, besides assent, the governor also has the power to issue ordinances. Article 213.
Just like the president, yes. When the legislature is not in session and there's an urgent need for a law, the governor can promulgate an ordinance.
And it has the full force of a law.
It does, but it's temporary. It must be laid before the legislature when it comes back into session. And if they don't approve it, it ceases to operate 6 weeks after they reassemble.
So it's a stopgap measure, not a way to bypass the legislature permanently.
It can't be. And the governor can only issue it on the advice of the Council of Ministers. And there are some bills, like those affecting the High Court, for which they'd need the president's instructions even to issue an ordinance.
Finally, on legislative powers, let's touch on their special role in scheduled and tribal areas. This is under the 5th and 6th schedules.
This is a really important nuanced power. Under the 5th schedule, the governor can direct that a law passed by Parliament does not apply to a scheduled area in the state.
Wait, a central law?
A central law, or that it applies only with certain modifications. It's an extraordinary power.
Why is that power given to a state's appointed head to modify a central law?
The thinking behind it is that the governor is the constitutional protector of the unique culture and rights of tribal communities in those areas. A general law made for the whole country might be harmful or disruptive to their traditional way of life.
So the governor acts as a filter.
A constitutional filter, yes. And they do this after consulting with the tribe's advisory council. The governor of Assam has similar powers for the tribal areas under the 6th schedule. It's a powerful tool for localized governance.
All right, let's move on to the governor's judicial and financial oversight functions. We'll start with the pardoning power, Article 161. It's similar to the president's, but narrower.
Much narrower, and the differences are key for any exam question. There are 2 big things the governor cannot do that the president can.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, the governor cannot pardon a death sentence. The power to grant a full, complete pardon for a death sentence belongs exclusively to the president.
Keeping the ultimate mercy power at the federal level for the most serious punishment.
Exactly. And the second exclusion is military.
Right. They can't pardon sentences from a court-martial.
Correct. That's reserved for the president as the supreme commander of the armed forces. It keeps military justice separate from state-level judicial processes.
But there is an area of overlap, a concurrent power, even with death sentences, isn't there?
There is, and this is a common trick question. While the governor can't grant a full pardon, both the president and the governor can suspend, remit, or commute a death sentence.
So a governor could change a death sentence to life imprisonment.
Yes, or postpone an execution, as long as the crime fell under state law. So they have some power of mercy, just short of a full pardon.
Okay, what about judicial appointments? They have a consultative role there.
They do. When judges of the state high court are being appointed, the president makes the final call based on the collegium's advice, but the governor of the state is formally consulted.
So the state executive gets a say.
A say, yes, but their role is much more direct when it comes to the lower judiciary.
The district judges.
The district judges?
Yep.
The governor is directly responsible for their appointment, posting, and promotion.
But not on their own.
No. Crucially, this must be done in consultation with the state high court. This is vital to keep the process professional and prevent political interference in the subordinate judiciary.
Okay, last couple of points here. Financial and electoral roles. Let's start with the State Election Commission, the SEC.
Right. Under the 73rd and 74th Amendments, the governor appoints the state election commissioner.
And the SEC is responsible for all the local body elections, panchayats, and municipalities.
Exactly. And to make sure the SEC is independent, there's a very strong safeguard for their removal. The state election commissioner can only be removed from office in the same way and on the same grounds as a judge of the state high court.
Wow, so that's a very high bar. It requires a process similar to impeachment.
It does. It shields them from being fired by the state government if they, for example, refuse to postpone an election or take a decision the ruling party doesn't like.
And what about the money for those local bodies?
That's the State Finance Commission. The governor is required to set one up every 5 years.
And their job is to figure out how to divide up the state's financial resources with the panchayats and municipalities.
Exactly. They recommend the principles for sharing taxes, duties, and grants and aid. It's a key part of fiscal decentralization, making sure local governments have the funds they need to actually function.
Okay, so let's try to pull all of this together if you synthesize the whole role.
You see this office that's designed with a fascinating dual identity. On one hand, the governor is there to ensure the state government is following the Constitution. That's their head of state role.
The impartial constitutional guardian.
Right. But then there's the other, more controversial identity, serving as the channel for unitary influence from the center, the agent of the center.
And we see that in their discretion during a crisis, the Article 356 power, and especially that power to reserve bills for the president.
That whole dual identity is the point. It's designed so that while parliamentary democracy thrives in the states, the overall unity and integrity of the country are maintained through this central representative.
The governor is supposed to be the bridge.
But as you said, they often end up being the battleground.
Which brings us back to where we started, with the Sarkaria Commission recommending that the chief minister should be consulted when a governor is appointed. A suggestion to build trust, but it's still just a suggestion.
And the political leverage really flows from that. The fact that there's no constitutional need to consult the CM, combined with the hard reality that the governor serves at the pleasure of the president.
Meaning they can be fired by the union government at any time, for any reason.
Or no reason at all. It tilts the scales heavily towards the union. The governor knows who appointed them and, more importantly, who can remove them.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to really analyze. Given these extraordinary discretionary powers, especially that indefinite veto the center gets over state laws through bill reservation, how does the absence of a constitutional mandate to consult the CM on appointment, plus the power of unilateral removal, how does that structurally impact India's cooperative federalism in the long run?
Think about the subtle political leverage it gives the union. They can influence a state's politics without ever having to do something as drastic as imposing president's rule.
Analyzing that tension, that gap between the constitutional text and the political reality, is why the governor is such a perpetually important topic.
Mastering it means going beyond just the facts and really understanding the political consequences.
Well, thank you for joining this incredibly deep dive into the office of the governor. This foundation, combined with these insights, should really prepare you for any question on this vital subject.
Don't forget, your free notes and practice PYQs are on our Telegram channel. And for our Legend members, the premium notes and model answers are waiting on Discord. We really do appreciate your subscription, your likes, and your comments.
Until the next deep dive, keep learning and stay exceptionally well informed.